Thank you, Clerk McGrair. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance Committee meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. What we'll do for a roll call is we'll introduce, everybody will be introducing themselves. I'm Trustee Judy Abraham. I am the Chair of the Finance Committee.
Timothy Hicks. Timothy Hicks, Finance Director.
Hello, this is Tom Hood. I'm your Budget Officer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marina Horn.
And I'm Paul Kirchner, representing the Police Department.
Okay.
Oh, Trustee Marina Horn, you may correct me. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. At this time, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to take a moment of silence, please. Okay, next item on the agenda. One, I've asked everybody to please sign in, and if you have any public comments, if you could fill out the form and please bring it up. I believe we have one from Shirley Redmond.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Abraham. Good evening, everyone. Shirley Redmond at 2246 South 24th Avenue. I'm here, and I've been to meetings, but I still don't quite understand the need for all of the $12 million. So what I'm asking today, the reason I came here today and changed plans for vacation is so that I can get a thorough understanding from where the money's coming from, what's going to be an itemized count of what it's going to be used for. I know the 911 center and there's renovations, but what are they? And Maywood's part of it. I want to know. So whoever watches this tape, if it's being taped, they can pick this up and say, we understand what we're using, issuing $12 million in bonds and what it's going to cost us. And again, I want to make sure if you please explain when, if there's a timeline for Maywood to pay their portion of it, and what happens if we don't get what we want. Are we going for 12 million? Or are we going for 10.5? Explain it, okay? Thank you. Oh, sorry,
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Redmond. I hope through, as you can see on the agenda, I hope some of your questions will be answered. Okay. First item on there is item number 3. It says review of the June year-to-date budget versus actual reports. That will be given by Mr. Hicks.
Yes, ma'am. So the year-to-date, June, which is 2 months into the fiscal year 19, we had revenues for the month of June of $769,000. Year-to-date, $2 million. We had expenditures for the month of June of $869,581. Year-to-date for 2 months for fiscal year 19, we had expenditures of $1,853,967. That brings a net surplus so far for the 2 months, which is, of $176,000. So that's the general fund. What I passed out in addition to the general fund, which we'll go over in very brief detail, is in the PowerPoint. The first slide, page number 2, just shows a breakdown of the revenues by category for the year-to-date June versus what would have of a straight line budget for 2 months of the full year. So when we look at 2 months of the fiscal year on a straight line basis, I mean, if the revenues just came in equally, we would be behind by $569,000. A lot of that is due the tax collection. The big tax collection just comes in August, so you see that taxes is the big driver for that. So if you look at the next slide, which is page 3, this is expenditure categories. So personnel services, employee benefits, contractual services, commodities, capital outlays, and other. The thing to point out here is contractual services. We had a huge, we paid for the year in June, workers' comp and general insurance. So as we get throughout the year, that number will become favorable and more close to budget. But since that payment was made in full for the full year, that's why that's showing unfavorable for that particular category of line items. But for the year versus year-to-date budget, we're 631,000 favorable. So when we look at the general fund and we take revenues minus expenses, that gives us an excess over revenues over expenses of $176,000, which is just what I indicated before. And then I wanted to review a couple of our larger funds, that water and garbage specifically. So we look at the revenue for the garbage fund for 2 months for fiscal year 19. We collected $122,423 versus a straight line 2-month budget of $114,000. So we're $8,253 ahead of a straight line budget for 2 months. When you look at the expenditures for the garbage fund on page 7, we're pretty much flat to budget for the garbage fund. So the next one would be page 8, or is it 8? Yes. Which basically just shows the revenue versus over expenditures. We're $634 ahead of expenditures at this point in the garbage fund, which is ahead of where we would be at on a flatline budget basis of about $8,000. Okay. Page 9, this is the water fund. So for 2 months, fiscal year 19, we have actuals of $534,916, which would be slightly behind a straight line budget for 2 months for about $24,000. So when we look at expenditures, we're largely favorable. We had expenditures of $406,347 versus a straight line 2-month budget of $968,102. That's favorable by almost $600,000, and the big reason for that is what's budgeted in the water fund is the water meters, and so we haven't gotten to that expenditure yet, and so that's the real huge favorability that we're seeing so far 2 months into it. So the last page, which is page 11, we have revenues of $534,916 versus expenditures of $406,347. So we're ahead of expenditures by $128,569 versus basically a straight line at this point if we were of about $500,000 favorable versus a straight line budget. So those, I'm going to take any questions at this time, or we just want to keep rolling?
Trustee Horn, do you have any questions?
No, not yet.
I don't. I think it's very well laid out.
Okay. The next thing that we wanted to talk about is the fiscal year 18's audit, which we've had preliminary interim field work. We completed that a couple months ago, and now the auditors will be back on Monday to start final field work. We anticipate that they'll be here for 2 weeks, and thanks to large in part to Tom and a lot of the effort of the staff, we're in much better shape this year than in prior years. We're doing a lot of the work in-house, and really staying on top of or getting a handle on the finances for the village to be able to alleviate having to use the auditors to perform a lot of the different services that they performed in the past, which would lead to some favorability in the budget. But we anticipate that that they'll be here those 2 weeks, and they'll be able to wrap up, and we should be able to issue the audit on time, or not anticipating any issues at this point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Did you have any questions? Trustee Horn on the audit? Okay. You go. Ready?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the discussion, item 5, discussion of the building renovations and a 911 center project, and it'll be given by a report by Paul Kurtzner.
All right, I've been attending the last 2 board meetings and giving some brief presentations as far as where we're standing concerning the building addition modification in the 911 center and how that it actually impacts us both financially and so forth. At the last board meeting, I submitted a report titled Broadview Municipal Building Addition and Modification, which was handed out to those in attendance. Mayor Thompson is going to be putting it on the website so everyone has a clearer idea as far as what actually is occurring. So when we started this project, preliminary estimates were compared to by FGM Architects, which is our architectural firm that we've contracted with, as well as Riley Construction, who is our construction manager for the project. And they roughly came up with some estimates as far as the different phases of the construction, different sections of the construction, and how that is actually going to come off with an overall budget. Based on their report dated June 11th of 2018, the project for construction aspects was in the area of $8.7 million. I'll go with larger numbers instead of detailing it out for specifics, just for summary purposes only at this time. As on top of that 8.7, 2.3 was estimated for costs for equipment. That equipment and outstanding balances concerns 911 equipment, things that incur in-house that are needed throughout the village complex. So overall, the estimated total for this entire project was $11,040,000. Now, that's not just strictly for the 911 center. This is for everything that is included in this building. So 2350 South 25th Avenue, this property, was $1,040,000. Now, how is that breaking out? A portion of this redesign and the addition is our consolidation agreement with the Village of Maywood. A portion of the cost estimates was just strictly related to the build-out area of communications, so the footprint, the area that's going to be used in the building of communications, as well as the material, the infrastructure, the computers, all that sort of good stuff as far as relaying a call for 911 assistance. That was in the area of $3 million and change. Based on the intergovernmental agreement, Maywood and Broadview are splitting that in half. They're entitled to half, we pay half. That agreement was made and brokered prior to the intergovernmental agreement by both village attorneys from the Village of Maywood and the Village of Broadview. As far as some of the concerns as far as, well, what happens if Maywood does not pay? They do not have the financing available to them. The money is going to be going into an escrow account. Where Maywood gets that money, that is something that the village attorneys have worked out, and they've discussed with their village manager as well as their village president as far as how they're coming up with their money. One of the questions was, are they going to be floating bonds? They're not going to be floating bonds. They supposedly have this funds on hand, or will have on hand when it is demanded for payment. When our costs come together, because there might be some confusion as far as what is a Village of Maywood cost versus what is a Village of Broadview cost, our architects are determining what in fact is a 911 expense. therefore safeguarding Maywood and it's safeguarding Broadview as far as what aspects are being paid out, who's paying for it, and what share is going to be submitted by Maywood and Broadview. So that has all been worked out with our village attorneys and as part of our contracts. I might be speaking out of turn, but I believe our village attorney is willing to have legal requirements that we can file against the village of Maywood if in fact they do not do it as well. It was a lot simpler and streamlined for the village of Broadview to take out the money for the bond versus the village of Maywood. And from my interpretation, and I'm sure our finance people can correct me if I'm wrong, this is more like a line of credit that's available to us instead of a full bond, correct?
No, it's be full bond.
A full bond?
Yes.
Okay. So some of those proceeds will be used, some of them might not be used, but it's the bond up to $12 million, correct?
11,
Okay.
not to exceed.
Not to exceed. Okay. With that, and our bidding process that we've gone through, we've just completed our third round of bids. A large portion of the dollar amount that is part of the costs that are associated with the build-out has been for our, what they call mechanicals, which is our heating and air conditioning system. Okay. For those of you who are not aware, we are currently living off of a quarter of our possible air conditioning system. We've borrowed equipment from the Department of Homeland Security, the Cook County branch, in order to pump air through our building. We've also borrowed their equipment in order to provide for generator services, because currently the outlay that we would do for repairs is not cost effective for purchasing a new system. Okay, it's like getting a bucket with a hole in it and taking duct tape and putting the duct tape around the hole. The hole's always going to be there unless you get a new bucket. What's happening is that we're getting a new bucket. The bucket is since 1990, so it is several years old and out of date. Other portions of this is our plumbing system. Our plumbing system is from 1990 as well. There's been breaks, there's been breaches, and we keep on constantly fix it, but needless to say, patching does not fix the problem. I am happy to report at this moment that after the third phase of bidding processes, and granted, I'll preface this that we are still talking with the representatives from our bid package 3 to confirm their suitability for the project, to determine if they're capable to handle the project and so forth. With our estimated expenses based on the proposal from FGM and Riley versus where the contractors are actually coming in with those bidding prices, we are currently $500,000 under our estimated budget at this moment in time. Some of the things that are coming about, you never know what happens until you actually pull back the line of paint and you realize that something else is majorly developed. A situation has just recently come up, happened earlier this week, where we were laying the foundation, and as a result of the previously mentioned sewer problem, we found a sewer line that was undocumented by the initial builders of this facility back in 1990. It was not run parallel to the building, nor was it run evenly to the building. So it ran off on an angle and at a downward slope where it shouldn't have been going on a downward slope, resulting in some of the issues that we've had concerning our sewer issues. When they went, after they found this undocumented pipe, in order to put new piping onto the building in order to correct the issue, they couldn't even do that because the existing sewer line was so corroded. So they had to dig flooring out of the current police conference room in order to get a clean connection. So those are some of the little things that we're realizing that as soon as you start delving into a problem, other problems start to develop as well. Needless to say, that was corrected extremely quickly by our plumbing contractor. As you can see, the progress that's occurring in our I'll call it our front yard, but it's actually our east side of the building. We've already laid foundation work. We've laid some walls per se, but we still have a lot of digging to occur that's out there right now. What else is going to entail that was put there in 1990? I don't know. Hopefully that's eliminating some of the problems that we've had. Recently, as you know, we put on a new roof. All our contractors are aware of the warranties with that roof, and they seem to be working well with our existing roofing contractor, which was Ridderford. To give you an idea off the top, the mechanical group, which is our heating and air conditioning, and you're talking about where this $11 million is being spent. $1.1 million was for a new heating and air conditioning system for this building. It's not like heating and air for your home where you go to Goodwin or somewhere down the street and it's $4,000. This is a 24/7 operation and everything has to get changed. The system that was put in place was not the best thought up process at that time in 1990, and the processes are not even being made as it stands right now. It's a pneumatic system in case you want to get into the details. Another major expense was our power, which is a completely new electrical system for our existing building, as well as the addition. Because as you add more things, naturally you need more capacity. That price tag alone is $1.2 million. Now this is not even getting into the 911 equipment. This is just existing power. The plumbing is another major aspect, and with the right team of our architect as well as our constructional company and the internal team that's working on this, we've been maintaining these cost-cutting measures and making sure we do not have the bells and whistles and the add-ons. And one of the comments that was made at one of the previous meetings was the gold-lined toilets. Those aren't happening. The platinum doorknobs are not happening. Bathrooms in individual offices are not happening. This is getting our business, and what considers the Village of Broadview is a business, to current operational standards of the year 2018 to suit our needs now and in the future. So nowhere down the line we have to turn around and say, oh, we should have thought about this, we should have thought about that, we cannot do this, we cannot do that. So we're trying to make more room, streamline what we currently have to make it more modern and up to date, because the Village of Broadview has restraints as far as manpower abilities, equipment abilities, and so forth, and we're trying to hit that all at one time. If you think about it as doing it all at once versus piecemeal, the piecemeal opportunity winds up costing more money in the long term. With the construction project, we've reached out to the Broadview Park District and we're waiting on their response, and I'm sure it'll come shortly, concerning moving our activities off-site. And what I mean by that is that our board meetings, our special meetings, our adjudication courts going off-site. By going off-site during the construction period, shortens our period of construction. By shortening our period of construction, it reduces our costs as far as bringing people in, doing the work, and so forth. So we've already thought about that and are moving forward. Some of the other aspects is our communications internally, in-house. Number one, between this village property, 2350, as well as the fire department at 2400. We're looking to increase our infrastructure in order to bring them on our existing computer network. That is also going to be worked into this budget as well. Therefore, in case there is ever an emergency in which the fire department has to vacate their property, they can come over to us. And in turn, if we have to vacate our property, we are moving into them. So we're trying to build in some redundancy, but not to the point where it's ludicrous. We're trying to keep this in a cost-cutting, effective way in order to get the most bang for the buck. So as of right now, with the project totals we're going forward, we're roughly $520,000 under the assigned budget. There was 2 hiccups. One of them had to deal with the electrical bidder. The electrical bidder misquoted. It was brought to our attention, and everyone would bring it, it comes off right off the top. They were bidding roughly $250,000 less than everybody else. When we questioned them concerning why is that kind of off, they realized they did not quote the entire job. They were only doing it piecemeal. And by us doing that oversight concerning why is this pricing so much lower than the estimate, we were able to eliminate the problem instead of having them, number one, come to us later and say we need more money, or number two, and this is my personal opinion, if you can't quote the job right, you can't do the job right.
Exactly.
Another aspect that we have is with another vendor who I don't want to name right now because they have not had their interviews. There might be another pricing issue as well, which we'll vet, and if it doesn't come up to the standards or the scope of those bids, we will tell them, thank you for applying, but I'm sorry you don't qualify for this job. We are going with the lowest responsible bidder, and as it stands now, we are in the 3rd stage. We have one more stage to go, which hasn't been published, and that's because we did not have a good enough pool, or I won't say good enough pool, but the number of applicants and bidders for this section of the project were not there. So instead of only going with 1 bidder or 2 bidders, we delayed the bid openings until we can get a little bit better response. And that has to do with the school season. A lot of these construction companies are tied up with schoolwork because they're trying to get the projects done quickly because school is going to be opening, depending on where you're at, within the next 2, 3 to 4 weeks. So a lot of these companies are tied up on those projects and therefore can't really commit. But because of our timeline and where we're moving forward, they will have the ability to bid on this project and bid responsibly for this project. Also, based on our timeline and the conversations that we've had with our bidders that are coming in and our subcontractors, they are very appreciative of our time frame and where we're actually starting with late September, early October, because they do not have to lay off their people, send them home. They're keeping their employees on a constant job. So that benefits them. By them keeping the people on the job, that means they have more manpower to bring all at once, which means it's shortening the amount of time that's coming on. So in the next month or so, we'll see a lot more activity going on in the building besides what is currently available, what you're seeing outside. So hopefully that answered some questions and some things to the point. And
You open it up.
I'll open up to any questions.
Trustee Horn, do you have any questions?
I do. It's for, I think the finance team specifically. Where in the documentation provided do we see the 12 million? Am I overlooking it?
No, it's not in, yeah, it's in the capital budget. So we were just concerned with, today, just presenting the general fund and water and the
Oh.
garbage fund. So
Okay.
going forward, we'll have once we, the team has put forth more expenditures, and once we actually issue the bonds, then we'll give updates financially on where we are.
Okay.
But at this point, it'd just be too premature, to start presenting all of that.
I do have a question to Mr. Kurtzner. At what stage are we at right now? Because I know that obviously there's work being done.
Yeah.
What is that? What would you term that? Is that stage 1? Is that preliminary before stage 1? Where are we
I'd
at?
say we are done with the prep work.
Sort of prep work.
The prep work was initially decommissioning our existing generator and going offsite with electric because we will be obtaining a new generator with this project. So we had to decommission the old, put in a temporary in order to provide constant power.
Okay.
The other one was rerunning the sewer lines and water lines. as well as rerunning the NICOR gas supply. Those were the prep items. Those things have been taken care of. Currently, we're completely independent from the old system concerning water, sewer, and gas. This is the beginning, I would say, of phase one, which is laying out the footprint and digging up the area, laying the foundations and the walls. The next phase after this would be putting the exterior walls up and roof to create the shell. Once the shell is created, then they can do all the demo work and so forth. Otherwise, they're taking down the wall along 25th Avenue, and we still have to operate. So they're going to be putting up the shell and then taking down the interior walls and then proceeding forward from there. We're still in the process of moving items on the police side, getting them out of the way.
Internally.
Internal stuff. We are also having the ability to clean house internally as well. Our village clerk is the one who was first impacted with the move, and he will be bouncing offices until the project is almost complete, at which time he will have a final home, but he will be going around from village to village. The next phase would be...
Do you have well, let me ask you this. Do you have a timeline on phase two with the shell, the walls?
Yes.
Do you guys have some target date?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I believe it was distributed in the municipal building. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't.
No,
I
it's
thought
not in this.
I prepped that one before. Pretty much what's going to happen is the first phase of the building will be in late September, early October, and that would be taking down the glass wall of the building department.
So phase one, you're in currently, that should be completed by, estimate.
Estimate mid-October,
Okay.
pending weather. Ideally, we want to get the shell up so we can do all the interior work during the winter.
Okay.
I
So
am
that's a
pushing
goal.
for an April 911 consolidated operations, but there's still going to be some finishing work, such as landscaping and so forth, that depending on when spring is, to roughly May. So we are on an expedited time frame. When anyone asks me, as far as the construction crews, when we're getting started, and I says, well, today is Wednesday, I want to do Tuesday. So I am pushing this agenda extremely fast,
Okay.
and they are fully aware of it.
Okay. I appreciate that. Did you have any additional questions?
No.
Related to 911?
No.
No, I think it was very laid out. I appreciate this, the addition modification. I hope you keep handing
Yes,
that
I'll
out
be,
to the residents and to the trustees, and then just even going forward at our next finance committee meeting, we obviously want you to be included so that you can keep providing the necessary updates, dollar costs, if things are changing financially as well.
Oh, gladly.
Okay. Trustee Horn?
I don't have anything, thanks.
Any questions for Mr. Hood from Budget and Treasurer, or Mr. Hicks, our Finance Director, on his presentation?
No, so by the next finance committee meeting, I can expect to see the capital budget that'll be presented.
We can present it, but more so what we want to do is be in line with the major expenditures. So at this point, they're really just in phase one. So the costs are really not going to be there for us. I mean, once the costs have really started to come in, then we'll start to report out on it.
I can understand the logic, it just seems like major expenditures can be subjective. I would want to see all the expenses.
Yes, please.
So when it comes to the cost, when you look at the cost for line items in the first phase, it's going to be minimal cost.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Just,
When it comes to when you look at the cost in the first phase, although we have an expenditures, and they're not huge, excessive amounts, so they may be a couple of $1,000s, right? But as you get into phase 2 and 3, that's when you're going to see the
Yeah.
bulk of the expenses that's being allocated based off this project. So say hypothetically for the HVAC system, that's our mechanical system, the heating and cooling. Initially, we may expense checks out in the first phase, maybe $35,000. But in phase two, most of the work should probably almost be completed. So then you'll see the bulk of that. So you may see 25% of the budget spent in the first phase, but you'll see the other 60 to 65 in the second phase, and then by the third phase, we had almost 100% completion of the project. So if you start phasing out the numbers in the early phases, then that's gonna get confusing and complicated and create a whole bunch of conversation when you can just nip that in the bud and just, it'll be, when we write out checks, it'll be in your warrant list on we expensing these amounts, but as Trustee Abraham have more finance meetings, she plan on having these meetings like once a month, then she'll be able to, and the committee will be able to expense the allocation of the cost for the project total. So it doesn't make sense to do it like, give you a number right now, because we don't know what the final number are because we still receiving bids in for the project.
Yeah, what you're seeing, if I may, what you're seeing now that the bills are coming in are for some of the architectural costs.
Right.
The FGM Architects, Riley Construction, they're pre-planned bids. Our bills should be coming in now, and then following that, then would be like this, what's going on here. So you're pretty much looking at a month behind the progress of the construction.
Right.
If that kind of makes sense, because what's happening is that Riley is getting all the bids or bills from their subcontractors and so forth. They're approving them, make sure that they're actually done and they should get paid, and then they certify it, audit, and then they submit it to us for payment and disbursements.
I do have a question, Mr. Kurtzner. You were saying that there was an estimate on the heating and air was like at 1 million plus, right? Power and electrical is 1 million plus, and then you said something about plumbing. Is that still, is that in the upwards area as well? Because you didn't give a number on that one. You just said plumbing.
Correct, because
Because now you found this extra line.
yeah, there was some aspects of a lot of the people in 3 in this last bid opening that occurred on Tuesday. We haven't sat down with and confirmed their suitability for the project, so that's why I'm kind of rounding these numbers off. But the estimated cost for our mechanicals, which are HVAC, was $1.3 million.
Okay.
The person that we spoke to and who was the lowest responsible party, they came in at 1.1, so there was like a $200,000 limit there. Plumbing, there was some savings there as well. But then on the reverse side, you look at our general contracting, which is the manpower, the labor costs.
General con-
Labor costs have since increased since that estimate. And what you'll see now, as I mentioned before, is that we got the steel right about the right time because steel prices are increasing. People are starting to afford that type of stuff. With that, manpower costs based on union contracts and negotiations, they're going up. So we're kind of seeing that as well. It was general trades, which is the boots on the ground,
Right.
was $939,000 as the estimate. Our lowest bid so far, because we haven't confirmed with them, but our lowest bid was slightly over $1 million. So that increased our line item for that aspect by roughly $90,000. Now, we haven't sat down with those people yet, so I can't really specify if they are in fact going to be our number, our lowest common denominator. They might not meet the scope, but we've already seen that estimate go up based on manpower costs, which we see everywhere now. Another aspect which kind of ran a little bit more was site utilities, and that was pretty much not on our plumbing side, but that was on our NICOR side. At which point we had to increase the, I'm not a gas guy, so I'll think of how I can probably say it. We had to increase our flow capabilities on the gas side for our building.
Okay.
So it's like we had to increase the hose size, I guess, something along those lines. So that increased our cost by about $30,000. But we're trying to manage everything together. So instead of it being a 2-inch pipe, it had to be a 4-inch pipe, which increased our flow, so therefore we had to do that. We had to reroute some of our service areas because, number one, it would be through our construction project, or because it wasn't feasible to do because if something did break later on in the project, not on a new side, but on our existing side, we'd wind up having to tear out floors and so forth and things like that, which would be an expense later on for repair work. And this way we kind of hopefully avoided that issue. Naturally, you can't plan, you can expect the unexpected.
True.
And kind of plan for the unexpected, but we might still get hit with that unexpected.
Well,
we can
right.
mitigate it.
You're trying to bring both worlds together, from the old school to the new building, so
Yes.
it's perfectly understandable there's
So
going
that's
to
where
be
some of those
additional
prices are
costs. Okay.
getting kind of messed
Okay.
up.
Yes, you know, I understand what's being said, but the only question mark I have is the terms that are being used. So we're using terms like bids, estimates, but when I hear you guys speak, I hear that money have already been expended. We've spent money.
Yes, we have spent money.
So the question that I had, which is why I brought up having a budget, is I would want to know the total money spent to date. I know that it may be considered minimal, but shouldn't we capture that and be talking about that? The total money spent to date?
That's part of the finance and
That's why I
Is
have
that
that
Mr.
question.
Hicks?
Yeah, I don't, at this point, I would say no, because we're still just in the initial phase. What we would want to do is carve this out specifically, and so that we're just looking at the cost associated with just this project, and we will do that going forward. But it's, you know, they're still getting bids and estimates in, and so what we wouldn't want to just keep piecemealing it. So when they have all the bids, when they have all of the costs locked down, then we can say, okay, then we can hold Paul accountable to a total amount and start reporting out on that.
No, that makes sense, but I heard two different things talked about. We talked about
well, the estimate is
estimates, and then there was money actually spent.
yes.
Right. So there's yeah, but it's still, those costs will be consolidated with the rest of the costs so that we can have a total number of what the project should come in for, right? So at this point, we don't know whether it's going to be, you know, 8 million, 9 million, 10 million, or 11 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we start just reporting out on costs, then, or expenditures that's already happened, we can't hold him accountable to what the total project is. So we want to get to the point where we know what the total project is, and then we can start showing what the expenses are against the total project, you know? So, I mean, it's just we just want to be able to.
I understand, get a clean number.
Yeah.
I completely
Right.
understand. I have a different idea. I would want to know the costs related to analysis. What I hear is that money is being spent to
And they will have all
uncover
of
and
that
to
back.
determine how much it's going to cost. I wouldn't want to lose sight of the money spent to make a determination.
So
we won't lease on.
just to be clear on the money that's been spent, is primarily most of the money that's been spent is on the pre-construction. So when you talk about estimates and the estimates and bids, so when you talk about estimates and bids, it's two different conversations, because we have to meet the state statute guidelines as it relates to bidding work that's over $25,000 or more, right? So then when you get the bids, the estimate cost is when we talk about the pre-construction. So when we had the meeting prior to us even entertaining any bonds or any of those things, we had what is going to be the estimate cost based off of square footage and how they look at construction and build outs and stuff like that. That's how you get the estimate. So then the Rodney construction team, they put together the estimated cost of what this project is going to cost us overall when the complete project is over and done with. So now you go to the bidding process. And so then we look at the bids, and it's based off the lowest responded bidder that come in. That's why you look at when Paul reported out, we have when we started the project, but when we got the bids, we under budget. So that's how we look at we're under budget based off what the estimated was. The estimated was here, but the bids came out here. We didn't know what it was because of when you look at prevailing wages, when you look at what they look at for square footage for construction sites, and they got their own formula that they do all of this stuff with. We don't have the expertise to do that. That's why we brought in Raleigh Construction to keep us on task and target, because they're the experts in making sure that we do due diligence with the taxpayers' money.
No, I understand. I do. I just,
Yeah,
And
so-
I think we're just disagreeing, but I understand.
We're not disagreeing, we're not disagreeing. I just think preliminary, so we will show, like with Paul's updates, as we have more information, we're gonna show, okay, this was all the money that was spent pre-construction.
Okay.
These were all the expenditures in phase 1, phase 2, and all
And
of
so
those different
you
things.
don't think it's valuable to keep a running total and a communicated?
We will, we will. We
And-
will.
But if we will, then how come
And we
not?
have also. What I want to add on to this is in fiscal 17 and 18, we spent money on this project. It's a specific line item in those budgets, and the money that was spent in those years it's already been posted to the building account. When we incur the rest of these funds, it'll all be combined together. So it'll be from the initial architectural fees up through, as stuff goes along, it's getting recorded into the GL. So as the money is spent, we are keeping track of it.
Okay.
And so, and just lastly, so we want to let them get through the first initial preliminary and then report out on the total for that. And then as we know that once they get through phase 1, which will be the bulk of the expenditures, then we can start reporting out on that. Because once they're done with the preliminary, they're done, right? So when we report out and say these are the numbers, then because what we're spending now is funds that needed to be spent, that were budgeted for, that has nothing to do with the issuance of bonds.
Okay. That
You
makes
understand
more
that?
sense. So
Okay?
that connects the
So,
dots for me.
so,
Okay.
so then when all of the construction happens, then that will be from the bond proceeds.
Okay.
Okay?
I understand.
So
Thank you.
we do it in steps.
So that was a different statement to me, but that makes more sense. The money that has been expended to date is not from the money issued from the bonds.
No.
No,
Correct.
it's just prepping.
I'm just not sure. I wasn't sure of that, or I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
why I was
because we
asking
haven't
the
issued the
question.
bonds, and so the bonds is for the bulk of the construction that will take place and for the equipment. So, that's why we're choosing to let that first phase, preliminary phase gets
Okay.
complete, because those expenditures have been budgeted for. Those expenditures, again, have nothing to do with the issuance of the bonds.
That makes more sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
The other comment I would make is that we talked about other expenses outside of I don't know if you want to go into that. Should I go into that? Outside of the 911 center that we're going to use money from the bonds for? Or is that not on the agenda today? Right. Okay, so I'll make it real quick. It's a statement, just so you'll know that there was talk about using money from the bonds to take care of equipment for public works. I did meet with the mayor about it, as to how we were going to spend the money and what public works actually needed. So even though they made a commitment, or the talk was 12 million in bonds, you may not spend 12 million in bonds. The money is available. Public Works is providing POs, pictures, et cetera, of what they need, and then the mayor's getting estimates on the current equipment so that we can get trade-in value and do the math, et cetera. So I just wanted you guys to be aware that there are needs within Public Works, but no money has been committed yet to Public Works because an assessment is still being conducted related to what equipment is actually needed, and they are providing pictures so that we can see what they're going to be using and what the money you can get for the old equipment, because you just don't want to throw it away. It's worth something. So that's it. Thank you.
Anybody for closing before? One thing, Ms. Redmond, did we answer your questions that you had said? You asked for details, the $12 million bond issue. You asked about the 911 center. I hope we answered them all.
Can I say one thing before Ms. Rowland speaks? We're not issuing $12 million in bonds.
Right.
That's number one. I mean, but we need to be real clear in that conversation.
Right, because she mentioned that.
The bonds that's being issued, it's not $12 million in the bonds that's being issued. The conversation for the bonds that we brought before the board was up to $12
Right,
million.
up
So
to.
it could be less than that.
Right.
So let's just be real clear on the conversation and what we articulate to the public. It's not a $12 million bond, okay? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Madam President, Madam Chair.
Right.
Very clear, when you issue bonds, and about 30% of my work is in the public finance realm. I've done over $1 billion worth of bond transactions. What is generally done, especially in Cook County, is what's called a parameters ordinance. And that parameters ordinance is just like it sounds. The parameters allow us to go this far. And I believe, I forget what the parameters ordinance, which we would be putting forth, proposed for approval at this Monday night's board meeting. But what's the amount on the parameters ordinance that's being circulated at this point?
I think it's up to 12 million.
It's up to 12 million. That does not mean we are going to issue $12 million worth of debt.
Right.
What that means is the corporate authorities have allowed $12 million of debt of authority. And it does not mean, there was numbers of the estimates. This isn't, just for the edification of the Finance Committee, this isn't a shot in the dark. We have planned out what's being used and what is going to be. At any point in time, Paul and the rest of the team working on this, Madam Chairman, are going to work to decrease this value and maximize the effort to ensure that this building and this complex that has been neglected for years and years and years and years and years, longer than I've been a lawyer, is actually built in the right way so it goes on from there. So, again, to answer these two questions, number one, not $12 million worth of bonds, $12 million worth of authority. Okay, so that's the one clarification. And the second one is, this is a very educated process. We have professionals who are paid and have been paid and will continue to get paid to ensure that this is done the right way. But at any point in time, we can maximize efficiencies. We're going to do that. Is that correct, Paul?
Oh, you got it.
Okay. Madam Chairman, does that answer some of the questions?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, well, there's a couple questions I still have, and and here's, oh, okay, I will. All right, and I appreciate you giving the estimate amounts, and that makes sense in terms of the sewer and the electrical, and because I didn't realize all of that with the HVAC. But here's my concern, when you say the authority, to whatever, up to 12 million, who determines what it is before you issue those bonds? And will the public know before you issue bonds that we're going to, here's what I want to know, if it's going to be 11 million, 10.5, we know what we are getting into before you all sell those bonds. That's what I'd like to know. I mean, I just want to know. And then here's my second. I've asked about the intergovernmental agreement with Maywood. And I know you say it's 2 years, they can put it in escrow, but when? What gives us a guarantee that if they don't pay, they're not in? Who do we get? What's going on? Tell us a little bit about it, if whatever you can tell us, because I want to know if I'm going to be on the line as a resident for money for Maywood. Hey, if they don't work out, what's plan B?
Mr. Attorney?
Madam Mayor, would want detail estimated. Madam Chairman, under rules of decorum, I have to address you and the board on there, even if there are questions that are posed to different members of the board or collateral agents of the board, of which I am. As such, I will address those questions to you in my answers. I'll take them in reverse order. I personally held up this contract for 3 weeks to ensure that the village, was protected. There were people in the room, I won't ask them to identify themselves, but who were in the meeting when I said, I will not go forward with this unless I know, and the attorneys on the other side are certain, and will put their law license on the line, that you can put these funds up. That was in front of multiple people on behalf of the village and multiple officials from the village of Maywood. I would never ask anyone to verify what I did or what I said, but I also probably wouldn't be making that statement unless I knew that it was true. I personally held it up for weeks to ensure that we were protected to the best that we can. And again, this is something where anything can always go wrong, Madam Chairman. Then you have to sue, and you sue to enforce your rights. And we were provided with a method that the village of Maywood, without issuing debt on its own, for various reasons, because we want the security of their money, was going to pledge those funds. So that in reverse order, that's the second question that was posed to the chair or me, and I will address it. And the first one, you will know. So the bond process, and because I've issued this much debt, I don't want to go into Public Finance 101. I'll go very briefly through this. But there is an ordinance that gets passed, and that would presumably be passed in the very short-term future, that provides us with authority. At a later date, a bond order comes through. The bond order provides more specifics. For example, the interest rate, what the actual amount of the debt is and whatnot. At that point in time, that is delegated to the authorities, and then that is reported back to the community at that point in time. I know for a factual certainty that the only thing that will be on there was the authority for $12 million. These are not haphazard guesses that are made. They are made by paid professionals who issue trillions of dollars worth of debt. And so it is all, at all point in times up until sale, somewhat of an estimate because you don't know what the interest rates are like. For example, if you went out for debt in 2006 and it wasn't completed in 2009, my guess is you'd have a very different debt transaction. And I'm sure the commission and the experts on the commissions would say that. You never really know. Now, do I think that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks when we go out to issue debt? Absolutely not. Absent unforeseen circumstances. Like a meteor hitting the earth, a force majeure. But notwithstanding, these are the reasonable estimates and estimations of the people that are paid to do that. Paid professionals, fiduciaries of the village. On the second step, those numbers get reported after the fact. They will come back to the board will report that afterwards. Either the finance, probably one of the people in the finance department, president, goes through. This is, quite frankly, I don't know how to say it. I'll defer to the finance people. This is how it's done. This is the market, and this is how it goes on from every taxing body that issues debt. And trust me, there are taxing bodies that issue debt every day of the working year, except probably the day before Christmas. So I don't know how else to give better answers on that, but in reverse order, yes, I personally held up the agreement for weeks, if not a month, to ensure that we were protected, and secondly, you know what the parameters are, and then when the finalized details come through, it gets reported back to the public. Does that help, Madam Chairman?
Yes, yes,
Thank
it
you
does.
very much.
Thank you for that information. Trustee Horn, anything? I think at this point, we can adjourn. Want to make a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Okay. I want to thank everyone for attending our Finance Committee meeting. Yes, going forward, as Madam Mayor said, we will have future ones, and you will be notified as well. We will have the members that you see sitting up here will be here to answer any further questions and provide additional information. Again, Trustee Tierney could not be here due to another engagement. But again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I hope we provided enough information. I know a lot of things can't get answered at a board meeting, but at least at the committee meetings it can. So again, thank you everyone for coming out. We truly appreciate it. Thank you and have a good night.
Jessica.